You know how to do the difficult things and what the limits of power are and how you can use it. These TV tough guys don't know how to do that. We need to be smart at the border. It's a big problem. And here's the 5 things I'll do as president. First is sign an executive order on the first day that sends the National Guard to work with our overwhelmed Customs and Border Patrol officers. They're overwhelmed, and I'll tell you why they're overwhelmed. In the last 11 months, we have averaged 200,000 encounters at the border, illegal encounters at the border a month. You know how many beds we have to detain people at the border? 38,000. The math doesn't work. And they're overwhelmed. So first, send the National Guard down there to help them with all these encounters. Second, double the bed capacity from 38,000 to 80,000. Then you have a much greater fighting chance of detaining people for a period of time. Third, add 10,000 Customs and Border Patrol officers. That'll take a year to get done by the time you recruit them and train them and then deploy them. That's why you have the National Guard there. But get a permanent Customs and Border Patrol group that's bigger than the one we have now. Fourth, we desperately need, well, I already did 4, so now here's 5. 5 is we have to change the immigration laws in this country. We haven't changed them for almost 40 years. It was Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill who changed those laws in 1986. They haven't really been changed materially since. Right now we've got 6 million open jobs in the United States, in this economy. That must mean that these are jobs that Americans either can't do or don't want to do. And if we're going to grow this economy, we're going to fill those jobs. And every time in our country's history when we have had a need to fill jobs, what have we done? We've used legal immigration to bring people here who want to come to this country, who desperately want to be a part of the American society and the American economy. So let's start doing merit-based immigration, where you look at where are the jobs, what do we need, and you let people in who have those skills front of the line. And then have our employers use E-Verify to be able to make sure that everybody they hire is actually legal. But to get those 2 things as Republicans, we're going to have to give something to Democrats. And for 40 years, both sides have said, we're not giving an inch. Well, we didn't give an inch politically, but all we've done is give inch after inch after inch at the border. So we now have to fight that. But it's not a simple problem. It's a complicated problem, and it's a difficult one. And anybody who gives you the 1-sentence answer at the debate next week, you should cross them off your list immediately. Because that promise is just as valid as the wall promise was. And who knows? You elect one of those characters, they might be telling you're dumb 4 years later for having believed them. And lastly, I'll take your questions on our own economy and what we need to do. The first thing we need to do is to stop spending so much money. $33 trillion in debt. And I want you to understand that of that $33 trillion, over $13 trillion of it was accumulated in the last 6.5 years by Trump and Biden. Donald Trump, who also stood up here in New Hampshire 8 years ago and said he was a businessman who understood how to balance books, although if you listen to the trial going on in New York right now, it sounds like it was all make-believe at the Trump organization. But he said he would balance the budget in 4 years. Instead, in 4 years, he added $7.8 trillion to the national debt, the most ever added by any president in 4 years in American history. And now Joe Biden, who's the competitive sort, apparently, is inching right up past the $6 trillion mark. And he's got another, 15 months as president. He could wind up passing him. These folks don't care. They don't care that they're spending your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren's money now. We can't even conceive of how big $33 trillion is. It's inconceivable. But there's going to come a point where people are going to want to buy our debt anymore. And when that happens, we're going to have a big problem in this country. So we need to stop the spending. When I was governor, I inherited an $11 billion deficit on a $29 billion budget, with a constitutional requirement to balance the budget. So no chance of running up debt. And we eliminated 832 programs. I got this wrong. I said 683 last time I was here. And my old state treasurer called me this week and he said, it wasn't, he watched it online. He said, Governor, it was not 683. It was 832. I said, hell, man, most politicians get it wrong on the upside, not on the downside. I was short selling myself. So my former state treasurer, Andrew Aristoff, thank you for saving me. I had 683 stuck in my mind. He said, you're wrong, it's 832. So it's 832 programs in 1 year we eliminated. And we balanced the budget without raising taxes. And we didn't raise taxes for all 8 years that I was there. And we balanced the budget every year, and we wound up leaving the next administration with $1 billion surplus after I had inherited an $11 billion deficit. That's what we can do if you're disciplined and you know how to say no. Now, let me promise you that when I say no, I'm going to become unpopular. I saw it happen in New Jersey. I was 55% job approval when I walked in the door. I went down to 38% after I did all that cutting, because every one of those programs has a constituency. But what happened 3 years later? 3 years later, when I was up for re-election, I got 61% of the vote in a blue state. And it's because people said, you know what, we didn't always agree with every decision he made, but he kept his word. He did what he told us he was going to do. And that's the same thing I'll do as president. It will not be popular in the beginning to cut spending, because everybody has a program, or 5, in Washington that they really like. But we need to do it. And if we don't do it, think about this. This year, we're going to pay $750 billion in interest on the national debt. And interest rates are now higher. So as we go to refinance that debt, we're going to pay next year over $1 trillion. Before we spend a nickel on Social Security or Medicare, the national defense, any of that, we're going to spend $1 trillion, the first $1 trillion we collect from the American people on just paying the debt. We got to turn that around. So, look, next Wednesday is an important night in this campaign. I think it will be a much smaller stage, maybe just 4 of us, maybe 5 at the most. So you're going to get to hear from us a lot more. We've heard the rules. They've increased our answers from 1 minute to 1.5 minutes. How about that? Think about what I'll do with another 30 seconds. It'll be great. And our responses, our replies can be up to 1 minute now rather than 30 seconds. And I hope that people will follow the rules, Vivek, and not just keep talking and talking and talking. And we're each going to get a question at the open where we get to talk broadly about what we want to do, and we're each going to get a closing argument as well. So I think you'll hear and learn a lot more about the remaining candidates next Wednesday night than you've heard in the first 2 debates. I think that'll be good.